A Unique Life for Mr. Kobysh. An article from the British newspaper called Express and News from 24th of April 1970. Vitaly Kobysh is a journalist. He's a communist with a communist family, working for a communist country. Yet Mr. Kobysh lives and works in a luxury flat provided by his employer, complete with color TV in St. John's Wood Park, Swiss Cottage. He is the only correspondent in Britain for Izvestia newspaper. Soviet national newspaper. He is 42 years old, Ukrainian, born of poor farming parents. After the revolution, they made their names and position in society and sent their son to university. Mr. Kobysh holds a unique position in the world. He is tied to the Soviet Union, but is free to see, talk, and comment on anyone or anything he comes across. His thoughts on Britain are therefore equally unique, because they come from a man immune to the influences of our society, yet still able to look at the society with the objective view of a foreign correspondent. Centenary. I called at his flat on Tuesday after he had returned from a Soviet embassy party celebrating the Lenin's centenary. We sat down with vodka and he switched on the TV for news at 10. We are both professionals, he said. We can be quite frank with each other. There and then, all social and political barriers fell away. Mr. Kobysh started in journalism after studying in the Faculty of Law at Moscow University, and was with Moscow Radio before joining Izvestia in 1962. He worked in North and South America before coming to Britain 2 years ago. His wife Emma and his two sons Sergei and Andrei, aged 12 and 2, have traveled with him. Their home is in Kutuzovsky Prospect Avenue in Moscow. Hampstead is very similar to this region, he said. It is a new area where artists, writers, and actors live, and where there is a lot of intellectual activity. But there are no bars and coffee bars like in Hampstead. Mr. Kobysh wanted his children to go to a British school. The education is very good, but there would be too many problems. They would learn to speak the language and learn a way of life which would make it difficult for them when they return to Moscow. Then there is the political side. They would ask questions that I would not answer. So the eldest son goes to the embassy school. Criticism. His greatest criticism of Britain in television because of its harmful effects on his children and British children. All this violence and extremely dangerous and destructive. It is all murder, murder and blood. It has a direct influence on my sons. I asked him if the American spy films, often including battles with red spies, had any effect. Spying disturbs them, answering Vitaly Kobysh. They have seen nothing like this on Russian television, and they just do not understand. I took my son to see the James Bond film on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He asked who was this man who was being attacked and what had he done wrong? Who was the good man and who was the bad man? I could not answer him. I didn't know. But he still enjoyed the film. His eldest son has a free choice of friends, who include English boys. He goes to Swiss cottage baths and belongs to a swimming club there. Mr. Vitaly Kobysh also has many English friends, including writers and musicians in and around Hampstead. The British spirit is very cool and civilized, he said. You could teach us some important things in manners and etiquette. We are hot-blooded and excitable, but this is a cover for the true British sentiment underneath. The British seemed very reserved until I went to a football match. Then I discovered they were human after all. He says that the waves of fashion that sweep London are an infection. Minis, maxis, why? It is a little bit disturbing, but not really very serious. In Russia, we have fashions like infections, but not to the same extent. From youthful fashion, conversation inevitably drifted to the subject of skinheads. This is a very unusual for something outside, he said. It seemed to be an extension of the social problem and the protest against society. This does not exist to any extent in Russia. I asked him where was the freedom in Russia. He disagreed that he was unable to voice an opinion in public, but added, "We have struggled hard for our regime, and people have lost their lives for it. If someone says, 'Down with Mr. Brezhnev,' this goes against what we have fought for. It is just not our way of life to say something like that. Would you say to your boss, 'Down with you and your administration in Great Britain'? No, you would be expelled. It is the same thing." I was invited by the BBC to comment on the film of the royal family. I had to be very cautious. How could I criticize your royal family and not abuse my hospitality here? The way of life in Russia, he said, could not be compared with Britain. A home, for instance, took only 5% of a man's income, whereas in the country it took up to 25%. In shops, items in this country were overpriced by comparison. money. In Russia, if sometimes you don't have money, you borrow it from a friend, and he will be glad to lend it if he has it, and you repay when you have it. Money is not so important, but in Britain it is like a religion. It is very important. Transport. Traffic in London is terrible. I have a Humber Hawk, very good car, supplied by Izvestia newspaper, but I have only driven into town once in the 2 years I have lived here, and I will never do it again if I can't help it. I have never seen so many cars. In Moscow it is different. It is more comfortable to use collective transport, if it is good. Ours is good, and it is therefore not so necessary to have a car. Social relations. He agreed with the West Germans' testimony that East Germans missed the commandership of their own country once they reached the West. This is one of our most important achievements. In England, I can feel the social differences, but in Russia, it does not exist. That may sound like propaganda, but it is the truth. Mr. Vitaly Kobysh was moved, perhaps most of all, by our arts. Acting in this country is superb. It is one of the mysteries of Britain, how you can have so many fine actors and actresses in one country. London is a very pleasant place for a foreign correspondent. It is an intellectual center. The cream of musicians are still Russian, but it is far easier to see them here than in Moscow. Many of the musicians I have longed to see, but the concert halls in Moscow are always packed. Only since I have come to London have I been able to see them. Confession. 2 other surprises for this worldly Russian were fresh caught in the North Sea and eaten the same day, and tea with milk. I believe it is meant to add something to the taste, but I must confess, I prefer it without, he said. Mr. Kobysh, who speaks excellent English, loves gymnastics and exercises every morning. He does not have much time for other activities, because he is always either at work or with his children. In Russia, he also skis and swims. Before his present assignment, he visited Great Britain only for 2 short visits. But when he came for his main stay, his first introduction was to the British petty thief who stole his 300-pound camera from his hotel room. As part of story of the British reaction to the Lenin centenary, he accompanied the Soviet First Secretary in Britain, Dr. Alexander Chikvaidze, to the Unity Theatre, St. Pancras, to see the play The Bolsheviks. The reaction in Britain is very interesting and positive, he said. Even those against Lenin are recognizing the importance of his struggle. The newspapers like Times and The Guardian have expressed their enormous importance of his work for all mankind. The British reaction is less than a socialist country's, but then many people here are neutral. One aspect of Britain he cannot understand: homosexuality. He said that in Russia, where abortion is legal, the people hardly heard of homosexuality. His brow lowered in thought. Then he smiled. "I know," he said. "Perhaps it is because we have so many beautiful girls in Russia." John Sanglier. Thank you for your time.